Hey, Psych230 students, welcome to week 3. So this is just the weekly check-in video, and we hopefully you just finished exam 1, which was basically covering chapters 1 through 5, which is essentially descriptive statistics. I will be finishing up grading that exam today. I have to go in for the computational questions and also the matching question to give partial credit. In particular for the computational, if you showed me any work, I can give you partial credit on some of those answers. I will say that some people didn't upload their work, and so there were some points for the people that I've graded already. There were some points left on the exam that they could have gotten if they had shown me some of their work. So it's always helpful to do that. And that's also going to get that much more important in future chapters. Because sometimes you can lose a bunch of points, but it might only be one mistake early on, and then I can give you almost all the points back. So just be aware of that. Other than that, so now that we're done with section 1 was descriptive statistics. Section 2 is kind of a transitional section. We are going to start moving closer and closer to inferential statistics. To get there, we have to introduce probability and start talking about some theoretical things like this thing called the central limit theory. So what you're going to see in these next 3 chapters, so section 2 only covers chapters 6, 7, and 8. Those 3 chapters continue on with z-scores. But what they're going to do is take what we learned in chapter 5 about z-scores and add things. Each chapter adds something to the previous chapter. So it gets more and more complex and more advanced. And so what we're going to see in chapter 6 is we're going to take the formulas that we learned about z-scores in chapter 5 and add in probability. And we're going to add in probability using this thing called the unit normal table. It is a table that is provided to you in Canvas. Also, it's part of our book, where it tells you the proportions, area under the curve of the normal curve. The normal curve is what many people know as the bell curve or a normal distribution. So we're going to be using this table to look up proportions. And so in chapter 6, we're going to learn how to do that. It is related to probability because, as you'll find out in chapter 6, proportion equals probability. Now, then in chapter 7, we're going to do the same thing that we did in chapter 6, except now we're going to do it instead of looking up probabilities for individual scores, we're going to look up probabilities for sample means. So that brings into the fray this thing called the central limit theorem, which is, again, this theorem. It's a little bit, kind of hard to get your head around. And so we're going to apply that. So it gets a little bit more complex. And then in chapter 8, we kind of put it all together in the form of what we call hypothesis testing. And this is where we're doing research. We're actually doing inferential statistics. We're going to make decisions based on running a research study. And this is really kind of the central chapter in the entire class. By far the most important chapter in the class. So we're going to leave a whole week just to focus on chapter 8. It's by far the hardest thing to get. And what I will tell you is that this section, section 2, is the steepest climb in the class. Section 1 often for a lot of people is review, goes pretty well. People do often pretty well on the first exam. Second section, I start hearing people are struggling. It's new to them. It gets more theoretical. It's just elusive. So you'll want to probably up your efforts in this next section. Hopefully to alleviate some stress is just after this section, it tends to level off. It's not, it doesn't stop climbing, but it's not nearly as steep a climb from that point on. Part of it's because we're going to use the hypothesis testing method that we teach you in chapter 8. We're just going to keep using it every chapter, just using different formulas each time. So that's kind of where we're headed. At this point, in terms of on Canvas, just know that, okay, so week 3, chapter 6 is probability individual scores. Then we get to chapter 7, which is probability and sample means. You again have your muddy points, your problem sets for those. There's also probably a discussion in here that's not listed that I'll have to add, make sure it shows up. So that's something to be aware of. Here is also the statistical table packet. So if you click on this, this is a PDF of what is essentially Appendix B of our textbook. And it is all these tables. And this first one is the unit normal table. This is the one we're going to be using for chapters 6, 7, and 8. And it's basically the first 4 pages of this. You'll definitely want to print this out. I would probably just print out the whole thing, this whole packet, because then once we get to chapters 9, 10, and 11, that's where we're going to use table B2. We skip table B3, then table B4 we use when we do ANOVA, which is chapter 12. Then we skip one, and then we do the correlation, which is B6 in chapter 13, and then chapter 14 is our chi-square. So that's something you're going to want to print out. So I just wanted to point that out to you. The statistical tables, it's in the resources, but it's also just listed in the week. And then week 4, we're just focusing on chapter 8, the hypothesis testing, definitely kind of the crux of the entire class, where we're talking about the scientific method and how we do inferential statistics completely. There's a link to the research project. That's not because it's due this week. That's just, again, kind of looking forward and continuing to prepare for that. So that's basically what's coming up this week. I do, again, just want to warn you that it does, become a steeper slide, a steeper curve. You're gonna want to start working a little bit harder, probably spend a little more time on this class than maybe you have been up to now. And then again, hopefully after this section, about once we're halfway through the class, then hopefully it starts to level off. And what I tend to see for most students is that they're starting to get a little bit more and more comfortable in it. If you find that some of this starts feeling really elusive for you and you're struggling to understand it, I will, 1, say that is completely normal. 2, I want to say that is a sign that you're probably about to be learning. So struggle is good. If you already know stuff, then learning it's really easy because it already makes sense to you. You already kind of know it. So if you find you're struggling, that's a good sign for learning. But also just know it's very normal in this class. And there might be a point at which with some of this material is you're not really going to fully grasp it. You're going to have kind of a loose grasp of it, and that's not unusual. And that's okay. You're going to still be fine in the class. But because I've come to kind of believe that it's just a little bit too difficult for most students to grasp within one class, one semester. So that's kind of the idea. So hopefully, if you have any problems, just reach out to me, reach out to Jay. This is definitely a time where that becomes really useful. So let me know. Otherwise, good luck with everything.